Of the many things that we read in today's reading from Deuteronomy that are prohibited, some of them we no longer pay much attention to. Some of them might seem really strange. But this one's interesting, and this one remains. Do not charge a fellow Israelite interest, neither on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but not a fellow Israelite, so that the Lord your God may bless you in everything you put your hand to in the land you are entering to possess. Again, we have the strange idea that morality, the commandments, only apply to those within the select group. It takes a long time until we begin to see that all of this should apply to every human. But the Catholic Church still applies this. Jews, Muslims, and Catholics insist that usury not be practiced. And that is what this is called that we just read about. Charging interest on a loan that is consumed in the usage, or charging for the use of the money as well as for the money. If you lend money to someone who is poor and who needs it to purchase food or clothing or something, food in particular, if I borrow money from you because I have no money to pay for food, and then I take the money you've lent me and I go buy a hamburger and I eat it, and then you say, well, give me back the money I lent you and give me back the use of that money because you put it to use when you ate the hamburger. But I really didn't. I consumed the hamburger. Now, the Catholic Church believes that we can take a share in the profit of a loan that is not for merely for use or for consumption. But even though the church doesn't practice this, the church still teaches what Deuteronomy teaches and what the Muslims still follow. And that is that among yourselves, for the Jews and the Muslims, and among all people, for Catholics, we are not to charge money for loans for people who are in need. And in a sense, we're not to charge for the use of money. We can take a share of profits if money generates a profit. That's usury. And in fact, usury can kill a society. It causes financial collapse. There are some credit cards that charge 29% interest or possibly more. And if you rack up credit card debt, and this happens mostly to poor people who rack up credit card debt because they are not making enough to pay their bills, the next thing they know, they can't ever pay it back because the amount of interest becomes, over the course of several years, multiple times greater than the original amount of money that was borrowed. So that's what usury still means in secular law, charging an inordinate amount of interest. But in Catholic theology, it means charging any interest on the use of money, unless it's a business investment and the money can be productive. The other thing I wanted to point out is what happens to Judas. Then Judas, his betrayer, seeing that he had been condemned, was remorseful and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. And they said, what is that to us? You see to it. Then he threw down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. But the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury because they are the price of blood. And they consulted together and bought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Therefore, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Judas repents, but his repentance is spurned and rejected by the high and mighty Jewish leaders. He wants to confess and be forgiven, but they say to him, what is that to us? What do we care that you've sinned? We've benefited from your sin. What do we care that you feel bad? Look to it yourself. And he goes and commits suicide. But they're so Pharisaical and they're so particular about their following of the letter of the law but not the spirit that they won't take the money and put it in the treasury because they know this money was used for the betrayal of Jesus. It's the price of blood, and therefore they'd better not touch it. I mean, they'll pay it, and they'll benefit from it, And they sure the heck are going to see to it that Jesus is killed, but they'll wash their hands of it. Kind of like Pontius Pilate. And they'll pretend as if it's not really their concern or their fault. I mean, if you start talking to people, especially people who have hurt you or others, they never admit that they've done anything wrong. I don't know how there's so much evil and suffering in the world and so few people who ever admit that they're the ones who are responsible. Nobody admits that they're responsible, and yet we're surrounded by people betraying one another and treating one another terribly. And the high and mighty, priests and scribes and Pharisees, won't touch the money. They'll give it to a fund that builds a cemetery to bury strangers in. But they won't do more because they have a skewed perspective on what it means to serve God. And their perspective tells them that the stuff they're doing to follow the letter of the law is more important than forgiveness, than compassion, than just trying to be good. But look around you and see if you don't see that in some of your Christian neighbors who are very proud of their faith. And may we always be helpful to people who come to us seeking forgiveness with a troubled conscience. May we not push them away. They may end up like Judas. We always have to be willing to welcome and listen to the sinner, because we are also sinners.